Now, there's more to this that really goes beyond the scope of this beginner's tutorial. If you're interested to learn more about inheritance and other mechanisms for reusing code, I encourage you to get my complete Python course. In this tutorial, I'm going to talk to you guys about modules in Python. A module in Python is basically a file with some Python code. And we use modules to organize our code into multiple files, just like sections in a supermarket. When you go to a supermarket, there are different sections for fruits, vegetables, cleaning products, and so on. We don't have one section with all the products in the supermarket. We have the same concept in programming. So instead of writing all of our code, instead of writing all the functions and classes in app.py, we want to break up our code into multiple files. We refer to each file as a module. With this, not only is our code better organized and structured, but we'll also have the ability to reuse our code. For example, over here in app.py, I've defined two functions for converting weight from pounds to kilograms and vice versa. Now we can take these two functions and put them in a separate module called converters. And then we can import that module into any program that needs these converter functions. Let me show you how to do this. So let's open up our project panel and right-click the project, go to New, and add a new file. We're going to call this file converters.py. Then we go back to app.py, select all this code, cut it, and then paste it into our new module, converters.py. With this, we have cleaned up our app module. It's not bloated with different functions. So as we write more functions and classes, we put them in their corresponding modules. A module should contain all the related functions and classes. Okay. Now, you want to import the converters module into our app module, and that is really easy. On the top, we write import converters without the extension. So we don't add .py. We only type out the name of the file. Let me close the project panel. Now, this converters is an object, so we can use the dot operator to access its members. So currently we have defined these two functions inside of our module, kilogram to pounds and pounds to kilogram. So we can easily call one of these functions. Let's pass 70 kilos, get the result and print it out. Run our program. So that is 155 pounds. Now there's also another syntax for importing modules. Let me show you. So instead of importing the entire module, we can import specific functions from that module. Here's how it works. We type out from, then we add the name of our module, so converters, import. Now here, if you press Control and space, you can see the list of all the functions defined in this module. So here we can grab one of these functions, let's say kilogram to pounds, and with this we can directly call this function just like a function defined in this file, app.py. Compare what we have on line 4 with what we have on line 6. On line 6, we'll have to prefix this function call with the name of an object, converters. So we have to type converters dot, and then we'll be able to access this function. In contrast, when we import a specific function from our module, then we can easily call that function without prefixing it with the module name. So here's what you need to take away. We use modules to better organize our code. Instead of writing all the code, instead of writing all our functions in one file, we break up our code across multiple files. Each file is called a module, and it should contain all the related functions and classes. Then we can import a module into another module. In this case, we are importing the converters module into our app module. And as you saw, there are two ways to import a module. We can import the entire module, and then we'll get an object with the same name as the module. So we can type converters dot, and then we'll be able to access all the functions and classes defined in this module. The other approach is to import a specific function or class from a module using the from import statement. Now here's your exercise. Earlier in the course, we had an exercise for finding the largest number in a list. So here on the top, we have a list of numbers. Initially, we set max to the first number in this list. Then we loop through this list, get each number. If the current number is greater than max, then we reset max. And finally, when we're done with our loop, we print max on the terminal. Now here's what I want you to do. This code currently has no organization. We don't have any functions. We don't have any modules. We wrote all the code in app.py. And that is okay for small programs, but as your programs grow, you need to properly organize your code into functions, classes, and modules. So, as part of this exercise, I want you to write a function, call it find max. This function should take a list and return the largest number in that list. Now, after you do this, go ahead and put this function in a separate module. So extract it from here and put it in a module called utils. So in this module, we're going to have a bunch of utility functions, okay? Then import the utils module into the current module and call this function. Finally, get the result and print it on the terminal. This is a fantastic exercise to teach you how to properly organize your code. So go ahead and spend a couple of minutes on this exercise. So the first step is to define a function called findMax. So on the top, I'm going to define a function, findMax. This function should take a list of numbers. So we add a parameter called numbers. Now inside of this function, we want to have these few lines. This is the algorithm for finding the largest number in a list. We don't want to bring the first line because this is where we create a list. So somewhere in our program, we're going to create this list and then pass it as an argument to findMax function. Okay, so let's go ahead and grab these few lines, cut them, and put them inside of findMax function. All right, so we find the largest number in this list. Finally, we need to return it. So return max. So here's our function. Now we need to move this into a separate module. So let's go to the project panel, right-click the project, and add a new file. We can also add a new Python file. It's the same. Let's call that utils. So if you add a new Python file, PyCharm automatically adds .py extension. But if you go to new file, we'll have to explicitly type out .py. So make sure to get the extension right. Now, back to app.py. Let's cut this code and paste it into this new module. Okay, beautiful. Now we go back to app.py and import our new module. We can either import the entire module, so import utils, and then access individual functions. So we can call utils.findMax, or we can explicitly import this function from the utils module. It doesn't really make a difference. So we could type from utils, import findMax. And then we don't need to prefix this with the name of its object. So we simply call findMax. Now we need to call this after we initialize our list. So first we need to define the list of numbers. Then we pass that list as an argument to findMax. We get the result, which is max. And finally, we print it on the terminal. Let's go ahead and run our program. So the largest number in this list is 10. Beautiful. Now, one last thing before we finish this tutorial. Here we have this little warning under max. And the tooltip says shadows built-in name max. The reason we see this is because in Python, we actually have a function called max, and it does the exact same job as our findMax function. So this is actually built into Python. But I ask you to do it as an exercise because it's a great exercise for beginners. Now, back to the warning. This warning is basically telling us that we are overwriting the built-in max function in Python. So we're changing the meaning of this function, and this is considered a bad practice. Let me show you what I mean. So let's comment out what we have on line 4. By putting a hash sign here, we can also use a shortcut, command and slash on Mac, or control and slash on Windows. So now this line is commented out. Look at the color of max here. It's purple. It's the same color as print. And this is the color used to identify the built-in functions. So now we can call this function and give it our list of numbers. Run our program. We get the exact same result. However, if we bring this line back, once again, we can use the same shortcut, that is command and slash on Mac or control slash on Windows. Now we are redefining max. So up to this line, max used to be a function, but after line 4 is executed, max is set to an integer. That is the largest number in this list. So we'll no longer be able to call it on line 5. Let's run our program and see what happens. So there you go. We get this type error. Int object is not callable because max is now an integer. It's not a function, so we cannot call it. So to solve this problem, we can rename this variable to something else. So right click here, go to refactor and rename this to maximum. So you can see the warning is gone. Also, we have the same warning in our utils module. So here we're redefining max. And as I told you before, this is a bad practice. We're changing the meaning of built-in functions in Python. So